Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Motivating Monday. Last time, we talked about what is faith and what constitutes a biblical faith. If you have remembered, Hebrews 11 has been referred by many as faith's hall of faith. Today, let us talk about one of the heroes of faith, the faith of Abel, in the same book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Verse number 4, as the Hebrews writer said, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. The New King James Version. The Hebrews writers introduces us to the first heroes of faith, none other than Abel himself. It's fascinating why his name is mentioned first by the Hebrews writer, but one thing for sure, his faith is exceptional and exemplary. Let us examine his example and how his faith can invigorate our faith in God today. But the first question comes to mind: who was Abel? He was one of the earliest names mentioned in the Bible. He was the second son of Adam and Eve, and we know who Adam and Eve were. Obviously, they are the first man and woman created by God. Abel was the younger brother of Cain, whom Cain eventually killed. Let us go back to the account of Genesis. Genesis, Genesis chapter 4, beginning from verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Obviously, as mentioned by our previous reading, that Abel was a shepherd, while his older brother Cain was a farmer. Let us continue reading the succeeding verses, verse number 3 through verse 8. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? Verse 7. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire for you, but you should rule over it. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother. And it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Cain and Abel were worshippers of God and approached God with their offerings from their respective occupations. From our reading, God was pleased with Abel's offering, while Cain's offering was rejected by him. The second question that comes to mind is, why was Abel's offering accepted? Now let us draw some distinction between the offering based on the text. Cain's offering was of the fruit of the ground, while Abel's offering was of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. It is said that the Lord respected Abel's offering, but not Cain's offering. Why did God respect Abel's offering, but not Cain's? It may have been that God had specified an animal sacrifice. It may be Cain offered what we call the leftovers, while Abel offered his best, for he offered the firstborn sacrifice. Cain's attitude may have been wrong. He certainly showed himself prone to display envy, hatred, because he killed his brother, and he was known as a murderer. Perhaps most likely, Abel offered with sacrifice, his sacrifice to God, or his offering to God with faith, while Cain did not. Let us reconsider what the Hebrews writers said about Abel's faith. Abel's sacrifice was more excellent than Cain's sacrifice. Notice that it doesn't say that Abel's disposition or even attitude was more excellent, but his sacrifice was more excellent. It also states that Abel offered his sacrifice by faith. Thus, the text would simply seem to imply that Cain's sacrifice was not offered by faith. And that was the reason why it was inferior and unacceptable. Abel's faith is the integral factor why or by which his sacrifice was acceptable to the Lord. Through faith, Abel obtained witness that he was righteous. Hebrews 11, verse 4. God certainly testified of his righteousness and showing respect to his offering. Jesus also bore witness to the righteousness of Abel, as mentioned in Matthew 23, verse 35, as well as Apostle John in 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. Through his faith, he, being dead, still speaks. The last portion of verse number 4. Through his obedient faith, he continues to speak today. It's incredible that even though he's dead, his faith is relevant to us today. His example of faith was written for our learning, Romans 15, verse 4. His example of faith continues to warn us in regard to worshiping God the right way. And what is our learning from these heroes of faith, from the faith of Abel? Let us examine what some self-reflection from the faith of Abel. Sometimes we are like Cain, and I admit that sometimes I become Cain. What do I mean by that? In our worship and service to God, we are not giving ourselves as the best offering before the Lord. Because what the Apostle Paul said, that we need to present our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is our reasonable service. Romans 12, verse 1. Sometimes we are not giving God the appropriate attitude or disposition when we worship Him. As the Lord commanded us to do, that we should worship God in spirit and in truth. John 4, verse 24. Sometimes we are like Cain when we offer ourselves as a living sacrifice to God. It is not by faith. So what's our takeaway from Abel's faith? Abel's faith, Abel's faithful sacrifice continue to speak to us today as God's children. God certainly cares about how we worship Him. He has always revealed the correct way to approach Him, according to this text, by faith. The faith that pleases God is a faith that accepts and obeys God's instructions above our own reason and self-will. It should be an obedient faith. It is the only faith or path to righteousness. Abel wanted to please God. His faith gave him the opportunity to do just that. If we truly want to please the Lord, we will not hesitate to act upon our faith and obey His will. As the Hebrew writer says about these heroes of faith, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and though and through it he being dead still speaks today. Hope we have learned about Abel's faith as one of the heroes of faith. Have a good and wonderful week ahead. God bless you all, and thank you.
Holy and holy.